You are now in tune to the most intriguing podcast in the universe. Hosted by the scientist Leon Marshall. Are you ready for Marshall's Melanin PODCLASS?
Listen, I am fully energized.
Class is in session.
You gonna learn today.
I found it really enlightening, like educational as well. There were a lot of things I didn't know, especially with melanin and like all the benefits of melanin. So I found that very interesting.
I love it. There's so much information, you know, it's entertaining and it's just facts after facts after facts.
This is the podcast where science is made simple and learning is fun. Welcome to Marshall's Melanin PODCLASS. Now, here's your host, the scientist Leon Marshall.
Yes. Welcome everyone. Welcome all. My name is Leon Marshall and you're tuned into Marshall's Melanin PODCLASS. This is class 29. Big up everyone who's listening right now. Large up the family in the chat. Put some ones in the chat if you can hear me clearly. Let me just check the audio. Put some ones in the chat if you can hear me clearly. Let me know where you're tuned in from as well. Thank you, family. Thank you. And thanks for joining me tonight. I truly appreciate it. Now remember, these PODCLASSes are more educational than anything else. That's why I've called it a PODCLASS as opposed to just a podcast. I do these on the first of each and every month, so don't miss them. And tonight's class is going to be about melanin and racism. Why? What started racism? And why does it still exist today? Let's find out. And as always, I will open up the floor a little later so you guys can ask your questions, make your comments, or just tell me what's on your melanin mind. I don't mind what you say. Just be part of tonight's class. Now, I've created this PODCLASS so we can all truly understand melanin once and for all. What it is and how it works. We must change the narrative around melanin if we're ever going to understand it. Changing the narrative means we need to change the language. Change the way we talk about and describe melanin scientifically. And that change happens right now. So let's go.
I've been to quite a few and I've heard Leon talk at other events, and as usual you do come away learning something.
Listen, I am fully energized.
That is brilliant. It's just so informative, mind-blowing. It's something that, you know, it's just put me on a journey of knowing thyself. It's just fantastic.
All right, I'm hoping the audio's good. Big up Birmingham in the building, Berkshire. Big up Paris in the building, Barbados, Berkshire again, Canada is in the building, and Lancashire. Big up everyone, wherever you are in the world, big up. And yes, this is going to be a very interesting PODCLASS today, talking about racism. Now, racism is one of those things that people like to tiptoe around. People don't really like to tell the truth about it. So let's see if we can get to the truth about racism, yeah, and how it relates to melanin. Very important for us to understand this, because if you can understand this, then you can understand why they go so hard with racism. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And as always, later on, I want to hear what you guys have to say with regards to racism and that sort of stuff. But without further ado, let's start. So it's very important when we're trying to understand anything for us to have good definitions. So if you've watched the PODCLASS or you've watched any of my webinars before, you know I define melanin as the chemical key to life. I got that definition from a master teacher, Dr. Laila Africa. So listen to him.
Melanin is the chemical key to life. There is nothing else to study in science but melanin. We call it chemi, which means black. The people who study melanin particles call what they're studying, the science is called chemistry. What you call chemistry, the study of melanin particles that go around in an orbit, and we call them electrons, protons, solitons. Those are melanin particles. That's why we call it chemistry. And the country you come from is called Kemet, which some people call Egypt. There's nothing else to study but melanin. And if you study chemistry or heard of chemistry and haven't heard the word melanin, you have just been studying social science.
And this is why it's important for us to understand this. According to Dr. Laila Africa, there's nothing else to study in science other than chemistry or melanin, chemi, yeah? So if that's the truth, then anyone who's studying science should be studying melanin. But because every time we go to college or university and they teach us about science, they'll tiptoe around melanin, or they'll make it, or they'll literally lie about melanin. Yeah, they'll literally tell us things that are untrue about melanin. For example, this is a video that I found online, and this looks like a doctor or some type of health professional talking about melanin in the skin. Listen to what she says.
Brown color of the skin. So this specific UVB range stimulates the cells called melanocytes in the skin, inducing them to produce the melanin pigment. So the color of the skin, this is the pigment, and it acts as a mirror to reflect, to help reflect the sun.
You see that? Lies.
So we're talking about skin.
She said to help reflect.
Rays, not to be absorbed by the skin, and to produce the melanin pigment. So the color of the skin, this is the pigment, and it acts as a mirror to reflect, to help reflect the sun rays, not to be absorbed by the skin, and to help to create the protection for the skin.
Did everyone get that? Someone said they couldn't hear, but did everyone get that? She literally said that the melanin reflects the sunlight and doesn't get absorbed in the skin. That is the total opposite of what melanin does. Literally the total opposite. Melanin absorbs light, so it does go into the skin, and then when it's absorbed, it deflects that light, it dissipates the light. That's what makes it harmless for us. The fact that our melanin can dissipate light, so it's not as intense, it's not harmful to us, because the melanin absorbs the light and dissipates it. So she's literally telling, and these are the people that people listen to when they're trying to understand melanin. She's literally saying something that is the total opposite of what melanin does. And this is the reason why we need truthful teachers like Dr. Laila Africa. So this is another clip from Dr. Laila Africa. Listen to this.
So we're talking about skin melanin. We have more of that, protects you from the ultraviolet rays of the sun. What I'm saying is you eat the sun. Sun shines on your skin, some cholesterol picks it up, takes it to the liver and converts it to vitamin D2. You actually eat the sun. The more sun you absorb, the more stronger your bones are. The less sun you absorb, the more weak your bones are. You got to take vitamin D if you live in this climate.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people take vitamin D when they're not in the right climate, which is near the equator. Now, again, if you've been watching the podcast, then you know there's different types of skin melanin, eumelanin and pheomelanin. Eumelanin comes in black and brown, and pheomelanin comes in red and yellow. Now, eumelanin is the one that they attribute all of the benefits of melanin to. So anytime they're talking about melanin, 9 times out of 10, they're talking about eumelanin when it comes to the benefits, yeah? Now, the main thing sound focus. The main thing that you need to understand with regards to eumelanin and pheomelanin is eumelanin is a perfect absorber of light. And that light gives us life. It literally gives us energy. And that's the reason why melanin is the chemical key to life. But pheomelanin is not a great absorber of light. It actually struggles to absorb light. And again, this is not Leo Marshall's opinion. This is science. Yeah. So I've said all that to talk about racism. Now, when it comes on to understanding racism, I believe there are two people that really break down racism extremely well. One is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Yeah, this is her here. And the other is her mentor, Neely Fuller Jr. Now, Neely Fuller Jr. is more about what shall we do about racism. That's where he's coming from. That's his angle. Whereas Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she's more about why does racism exist? She wants to break down the why, like the psyche of these people. Why does racism even exist? And if you're familiar with her work, she believes that it's due to the fear of genetic annihilation.
Black people have the greatest genetic potential to produce the black pigment melanin, which gives off skin color. And since we have the greatest, the highest level of genetically determined ability to produce this pigment that can cause white genetic annihilation, and it's only males who can impose sexual intercourse. And so the focus consciously, subconsciously has to zero in on the males. This is why I say that understanding, I'm not talking about institutional racism, I'm talking about a total system construct that develops out of certain patterns of thinking on the part of people who classify themselves as white.
Okay, so she believes that that is the main reason for racism. And unfortunately, she's not with us anymore. But when she was, she used to debate people on TV. All of her debates are still available to view on YouTube. Very powerful debates. One of them was on Phil Donahue's show. And just listen to how, you know, she breaks down. And to be fair, Donahue kind of agrees with her at certain points. Yeah. So just watch this clip. This is when she was on the Donahue show.
All over the place. You're a psychiatrist and you're author of a theory. Here's what she's saying. First of all, white people are dying out. Into the next century, everybody on earth may be of color. And we're scared about it. Already we're a minority. Did you know that? I'll guess 25% of us are white, maybe less than that. And that's the reason we're racist. We're not only afraid of dying out, but we're also jealous because we have no color.
Hold on. Can people put a 1 in the chat if you can hear these clips? Because 2 people have said that they can't hear the clips now. Put a 1 in the chat if you're hearing these clips. Okay, so all right. So just those 2 people, it might be something on your end because everyone else can hear the audio from these clips. Okay. All right, cool. Thank you for that. Thank you.
You're laughing. How come we spend so much time in the sun trying to get brown?
Interesting. All right. So he kind of agreed with her there. He kind of said that white people are the minority. And he said that they somewhat have a fascination with getting color in their skin. And he gave the example of why are we always trying to brown our skin in the sun. Interesting. All right, here's another clip. And this one, like this whole, I think it's like an hour-long video on YouTube, and I suggest you guys watch it because it is very entertaining, especially when the crowd starts to turn on Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. You guys got to watch it. Yeah, very interesting. It's funny when we start telling the truth about racism and that sort of stuff, people get somewhat hostile and they can't take the truth. But listen to this clip.
I
when I was a very small child, I wanted to understand why black men were lynched. I asked my grandmother and parents, why would this be done? And my grandmother gave a statement. She said something like, well, some people just want to act ugly. But that wasn't sufficient, you know, as a psychiatrist.
May I interrupt for just a moment? Here's the read on that, and I know you want to add to this or make it just a little more complicated. The black male was lynched and often castrated because of the white male fear of the black male's, the myth is the black male's extraordinary sexual capacity.
The myth, yeah? The myth. Donahue said the myth.
The myth is the black male's extraordinary sexual capacity. So he was lynched by frightened white males who feared that if he ever got anywhere near the white women, that somehow the white male would be a sex. Now,
Well,
you want to add
now
to
his
that.
sexual capacity, what are we talking about? I say that the fear is that the black male can cause white genetic annihilation. And this is why the attack on the genitals, there's no history in the world of any non-white men attacking white men's genitals.
True.
But why do white men feel the need to zero in on the black man's genitals and cut them off?
Why? That is such a good question. I feel like when we're talking about racism, we, like Donahue just kind of agreed, like, yeah, but she really should have kept that out there. Like, can you explain that, Donahue? Why? What is the fascination with black men's genitals? Listen again.
But why do white men feel the need to zero in on the black man's genitals and cut them off? You see, and a lot of this is played out in symbolic behavior in this culture. For example, the culture says, keep your eye on the ball.
Yeah.
Keep your eye on the ball. And she goes into a couple other examples, which are quite funny as well. But yeah, you guys check that out on YouTube, the whole video. There's actually another clip that I want to play because this is where they go into, you know, the white population decreasing, which again, that is the main reason that Dr. Francis Cress Welsing came up with regards to racism. It's because of white genetic annihilation, which means if their population is decreasing, then there's that fear that they could be literally annihilated, genetically removed from the planet, and that's why they go so hard. Yeah, listen. Oops.
Boy, oh boy, you need an escort to get out of your speeches?
No, now, let me just give you a little background. This paper was written approximately in 1969 and presented in 1970. It was written for a group of black psychiatrists who were looking at racism.
Yeah.
It was also written because as a psychiatrist and working in a hospital trying to treat black people and white people, but recognizing that the majority of the problems that black patients had in a psychiatric hospital, when you took a history, you would run smack into racism. So I knew I had to understand racism to help solve the mental health problems of black people. So out of my brain computer, putting in the question, why do we see this behavior? Why have we seen it for hundreds of years? So I thought about these two things, basically two facts, that even though the white population says that people of color are minorities, that it is the white population that is the minority, the minority on the planet.
That's the reality you're saying.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
That in spite of the fact that black people, non-white people have heard over and over again, you're genetically inferior because you are non-white. That in reality, white skin is a genetic recessive status, not as said by Francis Welsing. You see, meaning that if
you and I were to have a baby, the baby would have color. And
This is where you can see in Donahue's reactions that he's starting to get uncomfortable with what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing is saying, and she has to stop him twice because she can see that he's getting uncomfortable, and she kind of says, wait a minute, this is not my words, these are words from your scientists. In other words, white European scientists, this is what they're saying. So this is how she breaks it down. So let me go back, but you can see it in his face that he starts to get a little bit uncomfortable with what she's saying.
reality you're saying.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
That in spite of the fact that black people, non-white people have heard over and over again. You're genetically inferior because you are non-white. That in reality, white skin is a genetic recessive status, not as said by Francis Welsing. You see, meaning that if
you and I were to have a baby, the baby would have color, and you make the contribution and I don't.
That white plus colored. Well, wait a minute. It's not Francis Welsing that is concerned about the disappearance of white. Ben Wattenberg just wrote a book, The Birth Dearth. There have been multiple articles in the newspaper talking about the decline of Western populations.
Yeah, here's the Washington Post, just to name one. We are a depopulation bomb, the withering of the Western world. Here, incidentally, this was the percentage of the West's population in 1900, the turn of this century. About 30%. This is where we'll be less than 10% in the year 2075. Here's where we are about today, 15. So we're not having babies.
It looks that way. And what's interesting is this is an old video. This was from early 90s. And what's that? 30 years ago, early 90s. And what's changed? What has changed? This is a TikTok video where this guy, he's explaining the countries with the most population decrease, and he uses his face on flags to explain it. And just notice what flags, what countries have the most population decrease.
How will your population be in 30 years? Our population is expected to decrease 10.1%. Our population also decreasing 10.9%. 12.3% decrease here too. 13.4% decrease here. I'm seeing a pattern here. All of you are in Europe. You're right, actually. For us, it's decreasing 15.5%. I'm not in Europe, and our population might decrease 16.3%. Japan, why are you happy about that? I'm trying to be optimistic. It's actually a problem. Yeah, we might decrease 18.2%. You were not lying. A lot of us are in Europe, so we're decreasing 21.6%. Yeah, we might decrease 22.1%. Weirdly, it's all in Eastern Europe. Well, I'm first. I might decrease 22.5%. I know you're first on the list, but like, that's not something to be happy about. It's not? It's really not.
So look at that. Now, can just using common sense, or maybe not even common sense, because common sense is not that common these days, yeah? But can anyone explain why this is happening? Why is it happening? Why is the white population decreasing so much? This was from 2021. It says white population falls below 60% amid browning of America. Now, this is the reason why I believe that they'll never tell the truth about melanin. Because why else would it be that the white population is decreasing if it's not about melanin? Why else would this be happening? Just using common sense. And it's getting so bad that even the KKK leader, he put out like a public service announcement to say that the white race is dying out. So we got to do something about it. Listen.
The Associated Press just reported that whites are now a minority of those being born in America. European American babies are less than 5 out of every 10 babies born and are projected to be less than 1 out of 10 births in just a few decades. This differential in birth rates means that unless a political sea change occurs, white Americans will ultimately be not only a minority in the nation that our people founded, but a tiny minority, well on its way to political and physical obliteration by the end of this century. White babies are now part of an endangered species. As a very young man, 40 years ago, I was scorned when I warned America that we would become a minority in our own country. As recently as the 1960s, whites were still 90% of America's population. We're not even allowed to continue our existence as only 1/10 of the Earth's people. Genocide is the destruction or wiping away of any race or any people from the Earth, and we are being wiped away.
Boy. Now, this is anti-racist activist. I'm sure you all know her. Her name is Jane Elliott. Yeah. And she had this to say about melanin. I'm sure some of you have seen this clip before, but she was talking about the fact that because the white race is kind of diminishing, in order for it to survive, it's going to have melanin. In other words, because some people were saying fertility and that sort of stuff when I asked the question why. if you're struggling with fertility, you're going to have to get IVF treatment. The IVF treatment, as I've said many times on this podcast, is due to a black woman named Henrietta Lacks. So then it goes back to melanin. If you've got a fertility issue, you're going to have to get melanin. Henrietta Lacks' cells, you're going to have to get some form of IVF or something like that to help you. But listen to Jane Elliott.
He did to me. People, get over it. By the time these young people get ready to have children, they will realize that as the hole in the ozone layer gets larger and larger, more and more sunlight is allowed to enter our environment, and more people who have pale faces are going to die of melanoma, which is a skin cancer that you get if you don't have enough melanin in your skin. Let me tell you, people of color are going to be very much in demand for reproduction in the future. Mark my words, you're laughing now, but you wait 20 years. You won't even have to wait 20 years, because they're going to see that if they want their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren to survive, they're going to have some melanin in their skin. That's the way it's going to be. This is going to take care of itself.
Interesting. Now, here's my question, yeah? If that's true, if Jane Elliott is speaking facts, then what would be the easiest way for them to get our melanin? Now, think about this. There's melanin in our skin, but there's also melanin in our organs. There's also melanin in our cells. There's also melanin in our blood. Literally, you have melanin all over your body. It's not just in your skin. So if this is true, where in order for them to survive, they're going to have to get our melanin, what would be the easiest way for them to get our melanin? Let me see if anyone's got any answers. So people are putting blood, some people put in organs. So blood, organs. Okay, and then how would they get our blood? Where would they get our blood from? Kill, organ donation, miscarriages. Yeah, through placentas, abortions. See, so a lot of people are saying similar things, yeah? And it's due to us being in the hospital. So whether it's blood donation or miscarriages, or not a lot of people said, well, no one said giving birth though. Think about that. Just giving birth, because again, when you go in to give birth, they can take your blood, they can take stuff from you, yeah? Now think about this. Again, if what she's saying is true, if what Jane Elliott is saying is true, and the easiest way for them to get our melanin is through our blood or through our organs, placenta, all that sort of stuff, then surely you start putting two and two together and things like this start to make sense. Black women are 5 times more likely to die in pregnancy. Why? That is very interesting. So when you go in there now, again, if we're going by what Jane Elliott said and what she said is truthful, then that's a lot of genetic material you're giving them when you're pregnant. Very interesting. And for some reason, Black women are 5 times more likely to die in pregnancy. And they never tell us why. Black men are more likely to die from prostate cancer. They never tell us why. Very interesting. And they do this a lot in the UK and America. I call it the Black people are more likely to narrative. They love to run with this Black people are more likely to narrative. And according to me, I think that this narrative is one of the most racist narratives the UK has ever run with. Why? Because it makes no sense, none whatsoever, to say to someone that they are more likely to die and then not explain why. Can you imagine if I said to you that people who wear red jackets are more likely to die? People who wear red jackets when they're crossing the road are more likely to get hit by cars. Obviously, the main question would be why? Why would people with red jackets people who wear red jackets, why would they be more likely to die? And then that person's going to turn around and say, well, we're not sure. We're not sure why. But yeah, we done our research and people with red jackets are 5 times more likely to die. The black people are more likely to die narrative is the most racist narrative in the UK. How can you say that someone's more likely to die and then you don't give them a reason why? And this is the reason why they will never, never, never tell the truth about melanin. And that's why it's quite refreshing when you do find someone like Jane Elliott, who's willing to tell the truth, who's willing to just be out there and tell the truth when it comes to melanin. Yeah. It's very important for us to understand this, because when you understand this, you start putting 2 and 2 together. What Dr. Francis Cress Wilson was saying 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, is still evident today. What she was saying 30, 40 years ago is still evident today, because every year the population is still decreasing. And it's very important for us to understand melanin from an honest and truthful perspective, because if we don't, and we listen to people who they may have honest intentions, but they literally don't know the truth about melanin, they'll say things that are totally untrue. So listen to this scientist break down the reason why we have different skin colors all over the world. Listen carefully.
This is a map of the continents of the Earth showing how much ultraviolet light lands in each latitude. It turns out the closer you are to the equator, the more intense the ultraviolet. We use reds and purples. But then as you move away from the equator, we change the colors to orange, yellow, greens, and grays. Now here's the same map of the same continent with just one color. And it turns out that everybody on Earth is descended from people that live here in Africa. And then as groups of us moved around the world, the color of our skin had to change. And here's why. Our skin is where we make vitamin D. If you don't get enough ultraviolet, you don't get enough vitamin D. But if you get too much ultraviolet, then you break down your folates. You have to have it in perfect balance. And because the ultraviolet varies, the color of our skin varies. And that's it, everybody. That's why we have different colored skin. But we're all one species. But we're not treating each other fairly. Not everybody's getting an even shake. So it's time to change things.
It's time to change things. Yeah, I agree. It's time to change things. But things won't change until we tell the truth. So this out of Africa theory makes no sense. The out of Africa theory makes no sense, that these dark-skinned black Africans moved out of Africa and not only did their skin change, but their hair changed, their nose changed, their arms and leg dimensions changed, their bones changed, their skull changed. It makes no sense. Their lips changed. And again, don't take it from me. I like to show clips of when Europeans or white people are telling the truth. That way, there'll be no argument. So this, I showed this on a previous podcast where these guys were talking about how ultraviolet radiation is used to splice DNA. And they talk about how the vitamin D narrative, you know, that black people moved out of Africa and because their skin was dark, they had to absorb more vitamin D, so they had to lose their melanin. They literally say in this clip that that is absolute nonsense. Listen carefully.
Higher melanin, natural higher melanin, that it's far more likely that that melanin will be coating the nucleus, the cell wall of the nucleus of the DNA. Now the point about that is that ultraviolet light, which is often used to splice DNA, is blocked by that melanin. It absorbs it. It doesn't allow it in to interfere with the DNA. And it could well be, and this is Nigel's thesis, that this was a blocker for them when they were trying to genetically alter the species, and therefore when maybe just out of random mutation something like an albino came along, they discovered, wow, we can get straight in. Right. And it may well be that the paler skinned nation, people on the earth, maybe have that pale skin because of this genetic experimentation to make things easier for them to work on human DNA. And in fact, Professor Steve Jones argues that this thing about vitamin D being, pale skin being there to allow vitamin D to be absorbed and so on, all these theories about why pale skin happened in the first place, he believes it's not an adequate explanation. There is no real explanation or justification for the need for pale skin at all.
Yeah, because I think if
dark skin is always an advantage in every circumstance.
Right, because most people would just automatically.
Hey, pull up that. She said dark skin is always an advantage. Listen again.
Adequate explanation. There is no real explanation or justification for the need for pale skin at all.
Yeah, because I think if
dark skin is always an advantage in every circumstance.
Right, because most people would just automatically assume, well, they went to live in the north where there's less sun,
yes,
so therefore their skin changed colour. But that's not the case.
According to Professor Steve Jones, an eminent professor of biology, that is absolute nonsense.
Right. Okay.
There's just no reason at all for pale skin.
You would want to absorb more light, and I mean, why did we lose hair if we came to a colder climate, etc.
Yeah.
So obviously, something's wrong with that idea.
Right.
And that makes so much sense. I didn't touch on this last time I showed this video, but he said if you come to a colder climate, yeah, and you get hairy, that hair is going to block sunlight. So Europeans, generally speaking, Europeans are hairy or hairier than black people. So it wouldn't make sense for them to be hairy because that's going to block the sunlight and lead to them having low vitamin D levels. If anything, the opposite would make sense. They should have less hair so they can absorb the minimal light that they get away from the equator, and then that would make their vitamin D theory make sense. The fact that they're hairy and the hair blocks sunlight, then that just annihilates their vitamin D theory right there. All right, let me open up the floor so you guys can ask some questions or make your comments and tell me what's on your melanin mind. All right, so if you have a question, you can either raise your hand or you can put your question in the Q&A. But these are things that we have to teach our children because our children need to know the truth when it comes to racism. And I believe that when you know the truth, you have clarity, and clarity leads to better decisions in life. All right, so let's get Alison in here. Alison, you can unmute your mic.
Good evening.
Good evening, Alison. How are you?
I'm very well, sir. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well.
Good evening to everyone listening in. It's me again.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Very interesting, your comment about why black women are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a women's conference last year, and apparently it's dropped to 3.7 times with new research on top of the ones that the ladies from 5 times more did. But I always share this.
A couple of years ago it was 4. I think last year it was 4. So now it's dropped to 3, yeah?
3.7.
Okay, we're getting there.
I do tell people this story because being what they call a geriatric mother over the age of 35, so they said, okay, you must have him on the 19th of the month. So I trotted in there on the 19th, and a healthcare assistant, not a doctor, not a nurse, said, oh, don't worry about that, come back tomorrow, come back on the 20th. Now, my my obs and gynae consultant said, you must have him on the 19th. So when you talk about black women more likely to die, if I had him on the 19th, he would not have had the complications that he had on the 21st. What business do they have to override the decision of a consultant that says, have him on the 19th? Oh, don't worry, just come back tomorrow. We'll induce you tomorrow. So I personally didn't have as much issues as he did, but I did put in the chat that I lost 1,600 mils of blood. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So I had to have a drain. And of course, you were talking about blood earlier. So the blood is in the drain. They dispose of the drain at some point. They put it in a bag somewhere, and that goes off to be incinerated. So they tell us. But you would say they never tell us the truth. When he was born on the 21st, 2 days after the date that they said, don't forget, you must have him on the 19th, because they knew the placenta would start to break down. because the placenta in an older female is not as healthy as it is in a younger female. So now you've got all these
Right.
factors. Why did the mother die? Well, her placenta started to break down. The baby didn't get any oxygen. The baby went into distress. The baby pooed and he swallowed and inhaled. So when we lose our babies and we lose women in childbirth, somebody on the front desk wasn't paying attention, wasn't as qualified as the people that are trained to do babies all day, every day, and sending women away when they should be induced, in my case, on the 19th, and then waiting 48 hours for a baby's heart rate to go from 143 to 60. And he was in there for 16 days. So that's just only one story where when they say, oh, how come we're losing women in childbirth? A lot of women had said, well, because when I said I was in pain, they didn't believe me. And they taught that Black women are not always in pain when they say they are. So when they're actually in pain during childbirth, we're not going to give them what they need. We're going to let them push on through to the other side.
That is racism. That is the epitome of racism.
But the
So
system is set up.
if they're taught to not believe what Black women say when they're in pain, that is racism. That literally goes back to the time where I can't remember his name, but the gynecologist who used to do all of his experiments on Black women without an anesthetic.
Yep. Yep, and we have seen those pictures circulated on social media, and there is a name for him, and he's not the guy that invented the chair where you sit with, you slightly, not Trendelenburg, it was before him. But all of these factors that women discuss in women's conferences, and there isn't enough time to discuss it tonight. That's just one scenario where could have lost the mother and could have lost the child because the people who are the gatekeepers to the ward where you're going to give birth, you're going to deliver, are like, don't worry. Right. And of course, on top of that, I looked younger than I actually was. So they didn't actually think that I was what they considered to be a geriatric over the age of 35, soon to give birth. So there's lots of factors at play. And unfortunately, when women do lose their children in the hospital setting, there's a lot of bitterness and upset because there's little glitches like that, the one that I shared with you, that somebody somewhere didn't think beyond. They don't believe us. So when I said, well, I've got to have him on the 19th, oh, no, don't worry. You see? Little
But that
things
just
like
shows
that.
you, though, that just shows you how sinister it is. Let me give you an example. If I said to you that there was a dentistry and people were going to this dentist and ending up dead in the dentist chair, at what point are we going to start pointing the fingers at the dentist? At what point are we going to be like, we got to close this dentistry down, or we got to start asking questions about this dentist? They normalize. That's the reason why I think that the Black people are more likely to narrative is the most racist narrative, because it's normalizing death. The more they say it, the more we accept it. Black women are more likely to die. Black men are more likely to die. Black women are more likely to die. So when we do now, they're like, see, I told you. I told you.
But can you see? Can you see? Because the system is set up for their survival only. If it sounds really bad, if they do lose a mother or a child, that's literally one less for them to worry about. And they do speak like that behind closed doors, because I've worked for the NHS since I left school, and I've heard all sorts of terminology behind closed doors. And when it comes to investigate these things, everybody disappears.
Exactly.
And the one person that speaks out, who's the actual whistleblower, what do you think happens to them?
Yeah, exactly. There was a guy, there was a Black doctor who spoke out against Black women going into the hospital. I think he was in America, and he spoke out against it. He was like, I think he said something like, have your babies at home or something. And then they fired him.
Yeah, because they want the placenta, they want the blood. And, sometimes even at home, if you get into difficulty, let's say, for example, the umbilical cord becomes, it compromises the child, then you need to know what you're doing at home, and then when you're ready, if you want, you can go a few days later and have yourself check up, make sure everything has come away that's supposed to come away. But there's so many things. And if you ever get to any of these women's conferences where they go into detail about these sort of things, it's everybody has got a story. Do you know what I mean? Everyone has got something to say about their experience in the maternity ward, the delivery, the labor, and all of that. But I don't want to take over your session, but I just wanted to say, so what you're saying is, if we repeat that phrase, that we're more likely to, that are we wishing that on ourselves, or are
We're
you just saying
literally normalizing it, because we got to think, yeah, especially the black women are more likely to die in pregnancy. You got to understand that giving birth is one of the most natural things you can do. You're literally giving life. So why would you die giving life? Like, black women have been on this planet for millions of years, and they've been giving birth, popping babies out like nothing. They've never struggled to have babies, never. So now everyone's struggling. I admit that, because of the chemicals in the air, in the food and all that. It's affecting everyone's fertility. But according to the evidence, it's affecting white people's fertility more than us. Their population is decreasing. Do you understand? So this is where I believe we have to start putting two and two together. If their population is decreasing, why do they keep on saying that black people are more likely to die? White people are more likely to die.
I fully understand the bit about fertility, because in my field, 51-year-old white woman comes in and she wants to have a test to see if her ovaries are healthy and her fallopian tubes are clear. And because she's paying privately, I might have actually mentioned this before, paying privately, they're like, oh, yes, come on, we'll check you out. 51 years old. Yes, please come and have all this test done. We'll take your credit card. But if a black woman goes into have an embolization, and she wants to actually preserve her womb, and they want to embolize the fibroids, they're like, oh, we don't know on the NHS. Oh, are you sure at your age that you really want to have a child? You're 40 something. Are you sure you want to embolize all of these fibroids? You've got 14 of them, right? So to me, when you say we're kind of like, it's the most racist thing to say, I see it every single day, and I can't say anything because I'm talking to radiologists and doctors, and I'm looking at them and I can see the discrimination between how they treat the 51-year-old white woman who wants to have a child and wants to make sure that her bits are, clean and clear. And then the 40-something-year-old black woman who wants to preserve her womb and have a child in her 40s, and they're saying, well, we can block off the blood supply to the fibroid. Just sign this form here, and if anything happens, you've signed the form, and it wouldn't be our fault.
Oh my
But I don't want to
days.
take over your session, Leon, because this is a
Thank you,
session
Alison.
in itself,
It
and
was
it's just
very interesting. Very interesting. Thanks, Alison.
all right. I really enjoy your
All right.
session, sir.
Thank you, Alison. We'll speak soon. Take care.
Yeah,
All right, family. So yeah, very interesting talk there. So Alison, because she kind of works with those people, she's hearing it from their side that it's just like, the gatekeepers when it comes to pregnancy and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't really matter what the black woman says, they're gonna give their advice. So Alison was saying she wanted to have her baby on the 19th, and they were like, no, that's all right. You can have your baby on the 21st. It's all right. So they don't listen to black women. Yeah. And I think that's incompetence. And again, using the example of a dentist, when you go to the dentist, what do you expect? You may expect a little bit of uncomfortability. Now, when you go to the dentist, you might get an injection in your gum so you don't feel the pain, but there'll still be a little bit of uncomfortableness. What you don't expect is to die on the dentist chair. It's the same with giving birth. When you go to the hospital and you're giving birth, you may expect a bit of uncomfortableness. If you're struggling, they may have to inject you. They'll definitely have to take your blood. They'll do all of these tests on you. So it's going to be uncomfortable. What you don't expect is to die from that, though. That is the most racist thing. And again, if people started dying in the dentist chair, at what point do we start looking at the dentist and say, hey, dentist, we got to ask you a couple questions, mate. We have to bring you in for questioning. Yeah. But we don't do that with the doctors and them thing there, because these people will never tell the truth when it comes to melanin. The easiest way for them to get our melanin is our blood, our placenta, our organs, and all that sort of stuff. So yes, black children do go missing very frequently. They get our organs that way. But the easiest way And yeah, there's killings, and then even in the autopsy, sometimes they'll slice up the body and take organs out. But the easiest way, family, for them to get our melanin is our blood, tissue, and organs. And anytime we go to the hospital and we give them that, we're literally giving them the chemical key to life for free. All right, let's finish up. I like to keep these short and sweet, so let's finish up, family. All right, so big up all the people that are on my French course, Les Secrets de la Santé Camit, which translates to the secrets of Black health, the secrets of Black health. And it's every Friday, and it's been going well. We've only got 1 week left, but it's quite powerful because we've got a translator, so everything that I'm saying is getting translated into French. Got a very big French audience that have signed up to this, so big up all my people, all my French-speaking brothers and sisters who are enjoying this course. And the replays of this course, if you're in my WhatsApp group, I'm always sharing the replays so you guys can check them out. All right. I like to keep these short and sweet, so I'm going to sign out now, family. But let's finish up. And what have we got coming up? Oh, VIP members, we do have the teaching course. So if you're a VIP member, log into your account and you can go and do the teaching course. That's a very powerful course that we've just started. You've only missed one class. So next week, I think it's Wednesday, we do the teaching course. That's for my VIP members. Don't miss that, family. But yeah, let's finish up. Genius. What's the reason for racism if it's not about melanin? What's the reason for hanging black men and cutting off their genitals if it's not about melanin? What's the reason for the white population decreasing every year if it's not about melanin? My name is Leo Marshall, and that concludes the end of PODCLASS 29. Thank you everyone for being a part of this. You're a part of history, trust me. Just remember, be the light you see. Just shine. More light, more love, more light. One.
Thanks for listening to Marshall's Melanin PODCLASS. To download this episode, go to thehiddenscienceacademy.com/PODCLASS. Be sure to catch the next class on the 1st of the month. And if you like this one, please share it with your friends and family. If you're on Instagram, you can follow Leon Marshall at The Scientist Online. And remember, keep shining.
but them can't do enough.